Ebola in Manhattan, the most densely populated metropolis in America. The infected New Yorker is a physician who treated patients in West Africa, and he just flew back through JFK Airport, clearing our supposedly newly enhanced Ebola screening process. So does this prove that screening doesn't work? And the only thing that will work is a travel ban from the Ebola outbreak region. Hi, everybody. I'm David Aston. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Elizabeth McDonald, Rich Karlgaard, Sabrina Schaefer, along with John Tamny and Rick Unger. EMAC, a lot of other countries are imposing a travel ban, and to some effect.
Yeah, you know, we definitely want to help people affected by Ebola. Absolutely. That's what I think a lot of people want. It's both a travel ban and pulling visas. 34 countries, including 15 in Africa, are doing it. Many in basically the Bahama region. Jamaica's doing it. And South America, the Caribbean, South America countries are doing it. It's pulling visas as well. So that's what they're doing. There's no direct flights to the U.S. from these affected areas, but the stopping of the visas and the travel ban, we're seeing that taking hold.
And you can see the stamp on the passport to know where people are coming from. John Tamny, the fact is that countries in Africa, like South Africa, like Nigeria, they say that these travel bans have been effective in their combating of the transmission of the disease, so why shouldn't we use it?
Because it will not work. If we ban flights from those parts of the world, all they have to do is fly from countries that we have not banned flights from.
But, John, hold on a second. As I just mentioned, you see the stamps in the passport, unless people can fake that.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough, but I say even then, where would all these people be coming from? Where's the money to be flying into the U.S.? I just think ultimately if they want to get here, they're going to get here. In theory, we could ban flights from around the world, from all countries, but it would be at hideous economic cost. I think we've got to relax. Not every single problem that we perceive as big requires a federal response. And I think with time, we're going to realize that this one doesn't either.
But this is sort of really basic government stuff, is it not, Sabrina, to protect the citizens? We have imposed quarantines on individuals, on areas in the United States before. We're doing it now. Shouldn't we do it from the countries?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I agree with Elizabeth here. The fact is, I think we have an administration that is more concerned with political correctness than actually properly protecting the American people. Lots of countries have issued quarantines and restricted travel in Africa. Lots of airlines have already stepped up, right? We have British Airways and Senegal and Korean Airways. They're all limiting travel. There's two things that we can do. We can restrict travel, and then we can have a more aggressive screening process. And I think we have to take this a lot more seriously. It has a 70% kill rate, and that is with healthy people. So this is a serious disease that we need to get more prepared for.
Rick, the Senegalese and other Africans say this has been very effective. So you were kind of leaning towards a travel ban before.
I've actually changed a bit, and it's interesting. I got to comment on John Tamny's remarks because I thought they were interesting. They very much matched what most physicians in this country are saying, so I think that's worth noting.
Most.
Yeah,
it's actually not most. No, it's actually not most, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's where I'm kind of getting to, and it's interesting. We're finding out through with John Tamny, this is not a political question. People forget that Alan Grayson, one of the most progressive members of the Congress, was the first to call for a travel ban. I actually am now much more favorable of the idea of letting people come, but putting them in a quarantine immediately if they came from one of those countries. I think that's more effective, would have been more effective in the case of this doctor.
All right, by the way, we're going to be talking about that on another show in this freedom cost of freedom block. But Rich, specifically with regard to the government imposing a travel ban from West African countries affected by Ebola, are you for or against it?
I'm against it. I think the greatest threat to global health right now is poverty, because the global economy is slowing down. And, 7 billion people, when the economy goes from 5% growth to 2 or 3% growth, that materially affects hundreds of millions of people in a negative way. And what we're doing when we send out this signal, I think it's an over-response to try to ban travel, is that we're sending panic out into the world where we don't need panic right now. It's the last thing we need right
but
now.
Emac, the point is, I agree with the lofty intentions of Rich, but the fact is that takes time to deal with economic things. This is something that is affecting us right now. This has to be dealt with immediately, does it not?
Yeah, and when you talk to the first responders, the doctors on the front line and the nurses on the front line, they're saying in the United States we are not prepared. The nurses union is saying that. Yeah. They're saying do a travel ban or pull visas until we are prepared, to Sabrina's point. And so, you know, the Red Cross is saying that you could stop it in West Africa in a 4 to 6 month time, with also experts are saying with the travel ban and pulling the visas.
Yeah, and Sabrina, the fact is that a lot of private sector individuals, whether they're in the unions with the airlines or the airlines themselves, may trump government action here, correct?
Well, that's absolutely the case. And look, I think that this word preparedness is the big one. I mean, I'm all against the culture of alarmism. You know that. I don't want hysteria. I don't want overreaction. But when I read that the National Center for Disease Preparedness at Columbia University is saying that we can keep this under control as long as we take the time necessary to make sure that we are prepared, that tells me that we need to buy us some time. We need to be more careful. We need to be more vigilant about who we're letting into the country right now.
And John Tamny, you are rightly suspicious of government officials being able to handle these situations. Aren't you equally suspicious of claims by CDC and others in government that they could control this thing without a travel ban?
Of course I'm skeptical, but I think that speaks to a broader point. Government responses to anything are incompetence and slow motion. Why, if this is such a big scare, would we rely on these individuals to create some sort of national response? I think this is a situation where Republicans and conservatives should say, we do not elect presidents. We do not expect the federal government also to fight infectious diseases. This is something that we will handle locally. It's not a national response. And if it is, it's by definition going to be incompetent.
Hold on, one at a time. Rich, hold on. I want to go to Rich for a second, because even universities, Rich, like Harvard University, all these liberal institutions are now calling for travel bans from their own students and their own faculty going to these places.
Well, you raised a lot of good points here, but I think if the airlines do not want to fly there on their own, I think that's a better way of going about it than the government, which is prone to these over-responses and incompetence.
Well, certainly this government is prone to incompetence. I wouldn't argue with that. But over-response with regard to Ebola, Emac, I don't think they've been over-responding. I think they've been under-responding.
We've had individuals from both the health sector, doctors and nurses on camera all week on Fox, and we've also had experts in government. What they're talking about now is that they don't like the way the system is set up to stop the Ebola outbreak. They're saying it's flawed. It's based on a voluntary reporting system. That's how we had the doctor. Right. God bless him for being with Doctors Without Borders. Right. He came in voluntarily and reported voluntarily that he had a fever. How do you know that he's not infectious 10 minutes before his fever
Rick,
is there?
There have been a lot of plaudits to this doctor saying, God bless him for doing the work he did, but shouldn't he have imposed his own? I mean, if a responsible doctor doesn't quarantine himself after having coming from an Ebola area, like this doctor apparently did not, doesn't that mean it's time for the government to step in?
Well, you've already heard me say that I think it's a good idea that we do have the quarantine. But I do have to say this about the preparedness issue. We have come a long way since what happened in Dallas, and we have to acknowledge it. Look at the way Bellevue Hospital behaved in New York this past week when they came up with that one case of the doctor.
Look at what's going on.
He's going to survive. No one's going to get it.
Hold on a second. There's something else, Sabrina, that has to be said here. We don't know exactly how many patients there are. Emory University down in Atlanta had a patient that was admitted. We're still not sure if that patient had Ebola. He released a statement, the patient, after he was released, saying, I want the public to know that although Ebola is a serious, complex disease, it is possible to recover and return to a healthy life. So there's a possibility that he had Ebola. So we're not the public still doesn't know exactly the extent of this.
No, and there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread around, and there was a similar case, right, here in Washington, D.C., and I think one of the concerns is people say, oh, well, people get the flu and more people will die from the flu. The reality is the people who die from the flu are usually vulnerable from some other case. They're elderly or they're very young. Ebola is attacking people who are otherwise healthy. That's what's very frightening about this, and I think we absolutely need to be much more aggressive in how we're tackling it.
Last word from Sabrina.